Hey, everybody, I'm Chris Brackett. This is episode 14 of Chris Brackett's Land Life. This is where I take you on a ride about my life, about being a man, about being a Christian man that loves killing critters, that if the critters would let me pet them, I wouldn't kill them. I got a whole wall full of them behind me. I love selling land. I love everything about land. I love doing consults and meeting new people through land, through whitetails, through all the critters. I love killing ducks and bucks and all the fun stuff. And yeah, this is Thanksgiving week. I have taken a little break from putting out podcasts every other day because, it becomes a little bit repetitive when you have 70-degree weather. The does are locked down with the bucks. They've been locked down for 2 weeks. You have your token big boy that was running this last week during gun season. One of the main reasons is people get in the woods, the giant deer move. And I always joke around, and when I get an email or a text message or a Facebook message or an Instagram message that literally says, how do I get a big deer to daylight and be on his feet during daylight? And I joke around, I say, light the woods on fire, because the only way that you're going to get that deer out into the daylight in front of you is to either push him out of where he is, or you have to wait him out in the best ambush spot that you can think of. And when the Orange Army, and I like being a part of the Orange Army, don't get me wrong, I enjoy all weapons, and I enjoy all things legal when it comes to whitetail deer hunting. And so when the big Orange Army enters the woods, they're going into places that no one has been, whether nobody has been because they've been bow hunting, or nobody has been all year because they just have been, they couldn't cover the whole property. People walk out ditches. They leave when it's 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning before the deer have really moved. And I think those are a lot of the reasons why some of these big deer are moved around and killed during gun season. And it's unfortunate if you're somebody that's, not a gun hunter, and you're just a bow hunter, and that's okay. You'll get over it. Life is not supposed to be fun. It is supposed to be a growing period. This is in a season where you have a season where your growth and your pain and what you're going through makes you into the man that you're going to be. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about that as we get into Thanksgiving week here. This isn't going to be all about deer. This is going to be about man stuff. I've got one of my best friends in the world, one of my oldest, not because you're old, but one of my oldest long-standing best buddies that I've been through thick and thin with, took me out for my 21st birthday. His name's Andy Cook, and welcome Andy to the show.
I appreciate you having me on here, Chris. It's exciting.
Yeah, so you're in town for Thanksgiving, coming to see your mom, live out in Vegas. But we've had a lot of we have a lot of fun stories, and this is a friend, you guys, that we've never been hunting together. You've been duck hunting like what? A handful of times with your father before he passed?
Maybe a handful. Shotgun. Had a blind. My dad went to a duck blind draw. He got lucky, and we got the opportunity to go out together, and it was fun.
Those are your only hunting memories?
Yeah, a little bit of squirrel hunting with my 20 gauge single.
You do barrel. Realize that was 25 years ago. Plus.
A long time.
Yeah, we're getting old.
Yeah.
And so since then, both of our fathers have passed, and they worked together at the post office, both veterans, as you can tell right here behind me with the flag. Andy's got one just like that. Our dads were born in that generation of Dad was born in 1949, Vietnam War era. He was in the Navy. Your dad was actually he was in it.
Yeah, he's a United States Marine. He died he got shot 19 days after his 19th birthday. Kind of a crazy story there, but it changed his life forever.
Yeah.
And I don't even know how to put it into words. He never talked about the war, and that was something that was disheartening to me. I wanted to learn more about the war. I wanted to learn more about his experience, but disgruntled postal worker.
Oh yeah. Hey, you're talking to one right here. I was a mailman.
Yeah. Disgruntled postal worker, worked on the dock, worked his butt off,
Yep.
And came home, enjoyed Canadian Club and whiskey. It's weird the things that you remember the most about your dad when he's gone.
Yep.
I never thought that it would be like that. I think about him, I'll be driving randomly, down the highway in Las Vegas, because that's where I live now. And it's insane how I'll just pick up a memory of him, and I don't even know what to say. It just stops you in your tracks, because I think the most that we miss the most about when our loved ones are gone, the most is we can't talk to them. We can't pick up the phone and talk to them. And that's what I miss the most.
The opportunity to make more memories, or to be closer, to ask those questions about the Vietnam War. I asked just because I'm a little bit nuts, I asked my dad about everything on the planet. And I just miss that they didn't have the opportunity to be able to even come back from Vietnam, or from their era. I mean, they came home to a country that didn't really care.
Yeah.
Society. And what we're going through right now, as far as nobody really cares about the red, white, and blue. And we're the last of a generation, I believe, that is on the side of, we were raised by these men that were, really, they weren't ashamed of who they were. They were fighting for something that they were confused about, different stuff. And, but they were hard. Both of our fathers were hard men that were hardened. And, but it's so incredible that they found joy in duck hunting and broing out. Like, that's the one thing that comes back to full circle to me, is I think it's a lot of tradition with men and hunting. Is your dad, I still remember your dad coming. Well, I would work nights with him at the post office, and he would 100% ask me what I killed. He would ask me what I did, what I was hunting, because he was like, "You're crazy. You're hunting everything. You're hunting deer." Because your dad didn't really hunt deer, but he loved hunting ducks.
Yeah.
And then he loved fishing. And those men back then knew how to bro out, maybe over some beers, but they never talked about their experiences during the Vietnam War. Neither did my dad. My grandfather really didn't, and he was find out as he's dying. He was my grandpa Brackett, Les Brackett. If any of you guys are out there in the Navy in the old frogman days, or you can look up some records, Leslie Brackett, he was one of the original frogmen, and I didn't know he was bad to the bone like that. I just knew he was a conductor on the railroad in Santa Fe, Santa Fe Railroad. And then these guys all got jobs at the post office, my father, your father. And they broed out, dude, and they fished and they hunted. My dad loved ducks. And we're in Peoria, Illinois, so we are on the Illinois River. And back in the 70s and 80s was the heyday for ducks coming down the flyways. So all these guys learned from, like, my grandfather, and they hunted ducks on the river, Yep. And your dad loved it. And that's what they did. They worked nights at the post office, and they got up in the morning. Your dad worked days.
Yeah, he worked days on the dock.
Yeah. And then, but they would go blast ducks.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to revert back to some of that stuff from the war, from Vietnam, I think that's something that I regret, not pushing him farther to learn more about the war and learn more about his experiences. But I will say this, that probably one of the coolest moments ever was standing on the Yellow Footsteps in Camp Pendleton.
Yellow Footsteps, right? So what do you mean by that?
So when you get off that bus,
okay,
and you're a recruit.
Oh, you went to go visit.
Yeah. So my dad's, just to back up a little bit more, my dad's 30th reunion. So my dad was a 1st Battalion, 1st Marine, 30th reunion at Camp Pendleton. So when we got off of the tour bus to get to Camp Pendleton, we literally walked right off the bus as if you were a recruit, right in front of the Yellow Footsteps. He was to my right, and I stood on the Yellow Footsteps, and we are getting bombarded by the drill sergeant. as if you were a new recruit.
Oh, so this is like a whole experience, like because he
Yes.
was already a Marine, and you and I both, we didn't serve. It just
Yes.
whatever our generation, however it worked out. We didn't get out of high school to sign up, but a lot of our friends did.
Yes.
And so you took the bus there like you were a recruit, and that drill sergeant was on you since the moment you got off.
Unbelievable experience.
How did he react to?
He had the biggest grin on his face.
Yeah, because he already served.
And I looked over, I looked over at him and I'm thinking that he's upset.
Yeah.
And he's not.
No.
And he's just enjoying every moment because I'm sure that he had a flashback.
Yeah.
Of
when he was a youngster with his going in.
He signed up a week after. I'm sorry, he left a week after he graduated high school.
Wow.
And along with joined the military along with
my dad said he didn't join the Army or the Marines because he didn't want to sleep with his head in the mud.
Yeah.
My dad a little bit. He liked his little fashion sense and he liked all the stuff, and Andy's messing up the set here. But
my bad.
But my dad wanted to join the Navy just because he wanted to be the smart guy. He didn't want to sleep with his head in the mud.
Yeah, incredible experience. And then
your feet hit the yellow stairs.
The yellow footsteps.
Yellow footsteps.
And that's the real thing. These kids are coming off. They're kids. I mean,
your dad was how old?
18 years old
when he got in.
Yeah, I think he was 18.
He was drafted.
Yes.
Was your dad drafted?
No, he signed up.
Oh, he just said, "I'm in."
Yeah, and then to go forward with that, you get off that bus. I cannot imagine how you would feel as I don't know how I would feel as an 18-year-old kid.
Oh, I know how we would have felt. We were busy chasing girls. You were building cars, and to go into war, and especially that violent, that's a whole nother. Those are a whole nother generation of unbelievable folks that allow us to even be doing this. So big shout out to anybody. One, in the service, men and women. Number two, you boys that went over before us that our fathers would love to drink a Blatz beer with, and
or maybe a Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Pabst Blue Ribbon.
My dad was worked at Pabst Blue Brewery in Peoria before they shut down. Post the war, that was actually his first job.
Yeah, and Jody's dad was Hiram Walker's whiskey, which is right here, which is like. Yeah, we got more bars than we got churches in Peoria, Illinois. I mean, it's blue collar as it gets, killing ducks and bucks, and man, these guys were just a different breed. So
yeah, well, I'll tell you a quick story. I met the man that saved my dad's life.
Oh wow!
And I met the man that I'm named after, and his nickname was Andy. So his real name obviously was Andrew. And so that was a crazy emotional experience. And I can tell you that there was not a dry eye in the house with some men that saw things that still gives me chills and gets me choked up, even talking about it, even thinking about it right now. Like it was an unbelievable story that the man that I'm named after, unbelievable. He was shot twice, and they thought he was dead. So he was
your dad.
No,
Andy.
Yeah. So Andy, because Andy was the gunner, and my dad was an A gunner. So he's assisting.
He was helping him. Yeah.
Yeah. He's feeding that 50 cal that Andy was shooting and firing. But so they thought that Andy was dead, and so they threw him in a pile of Marines. Well, he wasn't dead. And he woke up after, being passed out, and he had to uncover himself from other dead Marines. People.
Yeah. His brothers.
Probably people that he certainly knew. I can't imagine the trauma from there. But
so he woke up, got out from underneath everybody.
He got out.
Okay.
And he survived.
Yeah. Yeah. And he had saved your dad prior to that.
Yes. So the man that saved my dad's life, the medic, I met him as well. And he ended up getting shot by AK-47 round that ricocheted off of the tank that had just been hit by a mortar, probably several mortars. And there were 3 Marines inside that tank. And the tanks, you had to jump to swing yourself up to get to the turret, the turret. And so my father saw the tank get hit. He knew there were 3 Marines in there. He wanted to save them, jumped up. He's hanging from the area where you go to swing. So he's got his arms up.
Yeah.
And AK-47 round ricochets off of the tank and hits him on the inside of your bicep muscle, probably 2 inches away from his head.
And is that where it went through where his tattoo was?
Yes.
I always wondered about that.
Absolutely destroyed that tattoo.
Yeah. And then he fell off of it?
He fell. And then he got rescued by the medic and then was laying in a field.
Mm-hmm.
And then the medevac landed in the field, and then he had to run towards the medevac. And he said he couldn't even feel his right arm. He thought his right arm was gone.
Yeah.
But he made it. And he spent a year in Germany, going through all the rehab and all the surgery and stuff like that. And then he was able to come home. And then to talk about what you just said about these military men that came home, incredible, disappointing part of our history, in my opinion, is that my dad was spit on when he got home.
Yeah.
It's just a shameful thing, that as a part of the truth of what happened to these men.
But I want to keep it happy.
Yeah.
Right. Because what we wanted when we sat down to what to talk about. So Andy's home from Thanksgiving. My wife's preparing things for Thanksgiving. We're going to hang out with Andy's family. And it seems like always around the holidays, both of our families are very small. We don't have any kids. So we always end up hanging out. I think that is where you have to come together as friends. And, people joke and say Friendsgiving or whatnot. We don't ever plan anything, but somehow we always get together. And the reason why we're talking about this today, and maybe not all about deer, is because it is about men being men, acting like men, and then your fathers, and then your family, and the generational pain, the generational understanding about what these men went through in our father's era, and then how it's passed down to us, and then how we stop generational sin, whether it be, the way we think. Like, they were thrust into a situation to where, they had choices, but the choice was to go defend and be men. And, there's a lot in scripture that I have questions about how, to look at war. And then at the end of the day, I think we just are concentrating on this today and talking about this is because you guys, if you're out there and you are either how would I put this? I would say that right now, if you're listening to this, the chances of you being a red-blooded American male that will protect his family, make money for his family, and do everything that it takes to be what we would consider still being a man, then you're probably listening. You're probably with us. And I know that there's guys right now that are headed to a bar, or they're thinking about how they make it through the next little bit, whether that's shout out to the guys that were, in the service, that were in the other wars or skirmishes, or however, it just saw just messed up stuff, or, were a little bit abused by their fathers that came back, because me and Andy both were, whether it be verbally or physically. Me, a lot more probably physical with my father, and I'm not scared to talk about it. And I wasn't scared to forgive him. And as you go into this Thanksgiving, man, Land Life is about the land, but it's also about our Savior, Jesus Christ. And it's about really stopping generational sin as men. And so how do you do that? I'm talking about the hard stuff, like being able to say, my dad was messed up. My dad was messed up from his upbringing.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that.
Like, it's before Vietnam. It's before their generation. It's the way they were raised. And then how do you break that generational sin? And then I know other guys that were raised in a Christian home, loved on, generational wealth that was then distributed. You took over the company and you married, your wife, and that she was the first woman you ever saw naked, and like did all the stuff you're supposed to. But most of those people that I know that were like that, let's say the Tim Tebow's of the world, and have overcome their own adversities and things, they're just built different than the men that had fathers like we had, and then those fathers that had fathers like they had. And then you're trying to find Christ or trying to find salvation in a world that really isn't programmed. You're just taught to be the best you can and to, I don't know, be nice and be good.
Yeah.
But you don't know the Lord and the gospel, right?
Yeah.
And then I chased girls and I killed deer and I killed ducks and I worked at the post office and I worked hard. And I think that when they were growing up, like what's your old man story? Like, but let me touch on this if you're just tuning in. Like both of our fathers are gone. Like we've put them in the ground. We have their flags. We have their stories. We have great memories, but we also are messed up. We're more messed up than a football bat, y'all, because of how our fathers didn't know how to communicate and how to be intimate with us. And so we're reaching out to men because for some reason we don't have kids. And I don't know why, but there's a bunch of us that don't, whether it was just by, luck or circumstance or whatever it is. But that generational sin in those departments are going to die with us. But I'm going to take all my money with me. I'm going to put it into land and whatever. And I don't really know. But so I think they were messed up before they ever got to be at a point where they wanted to go defend their country.
Yeah. I mean, to expand on that, I don't know what your father's particular upbringing was, but my father's upbringing was very strict. Yeah. And there was 4 boys and there were very, very, very strict. My grandfather, very strict.
My grandmother was also very, very strict. My father was the first of the boy, the whole family. He was the eldest, and man, he was whooped on too.
Yeah, yeah. So I think there's some physical abuse there too. Probably a lot more verbal too, I would say, because
you wouldn't have heard about it, but you would have heard about, hey, I got it. You're going to get it too.
My father used to say, I brought you into this world.
I'll take you out of it. Yeah.
And he used to say that all the time to me. And, as a young boy, that's really impressionable. But then when you become a young man, you can make your own decisions and you can really, really choose.
You can go left or right
to argue and push, or you can say, yes, sir, and obey. And I think that's tougher. For me, it was tough. I'll share my experience. It was tough for me to obey when I became a young man over 14, 15, 16 years old, where you're at a crucible of making a decision.
Yeah.
You're like, Dad, especially in today's age, with all this situation where, if you get hit by your parent and then they can go off and tell the authority or tell your teacher. And then
if I would have told on my dad, I would have never got even seen again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just had that respect. And it talks about sparing the rod in the Bible. Like it's biblical.
Yes.
Yeah. And if I was to figure out how I was going to raise my son or my nephews, or even if, I have not ruled out the fact of even adopting a young man. I don't think I do good with girls. My wife might, but in my years, if I had a young man that I could take under my wing and house, like I make money. I haven't ruled that out, but if I was doing that, if I was going to make a diamond, it takes pressure. It takes sacrifice, and it takes through that pain, through that fire, that forging of metal through that fire, iron sharpening iron, men acting like men, like those guys that made it back. Andy, your dad, the closest my dad ever got to being blown up was overshooting the ship, shooting short, and then them getting the ship moving, and then him, but he could have been gone like that, but he definitely wasn't in the field. He wasn't made like your dad was. Like he was definitely more, I'm going to be a sonar tech and I'm going to help in some other way using my brain some way,
That's the way to go about it.
I mean, he wasn't dumb, but
Yeah.
I mean, I would have done something stupid and said, like, I'm going to go sleep with my head in the mud because I want to shoot people. Like, that's who I would have been at 18.
Yeah, I'm sure that both of our dads had some very, very strict, difficult upbringings, because I do believe with all my heart that you are a product of your environment.
Yeah.
You are a product of that environment that you were raised in. And you can make choices as an adult when you get older and you become more educated, and you can make your own choices to be a better man.
Well, but the more stuff that is put in front of you as a young person that you just soak in, it's so much harder to bury that or move on from that. Yeah. And that's where everybody just, my dad taught me how to first check out chicks. Number one, woo-woo girls, Dallas Cowboys in the 80s and the 78. And I was little bitty, man. And the woo-woo girls, the Dallas Cowgirls, they were, you were taught to idolize women. And then number two is I remember having a fake ID when I was 18, 19 years old. And my dad was mad that I was drinking, but I was on the Jenny Jones show. Remember going to that? I mean, I was on the Jenny Jones show, and we went up there and had a $50 bar tab, and I was drinking with my dad. And, he taught me how to do that. He taught me how to, he taught me a lot more bad things than good things. But the good things that he did was he just absolutely showed me love. I remember until the last time I saw him, for sure the last time I saw him, he was still kissing me, trying to kiss me on the lips. Like, I know a lot of people laugh, but if you knew my father and how funny he thought that was with his big beer mustache to try to lay a kiss on my cheek. Come here, son. And he would try to just put that big beer mustache on the side of my cheek. He thought it was the funniest stuff.
Yeah, my dad did the same exact thing.
It was like their little way of embarrassing us.
Was.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
You did that now, these kids would be mortified. Like, they didn't get their humor. Like, my dad may have beat me in arm wrestling, kissed me on the cheek, and gave me $2 to get 2 Whoppers on the way home, because Whoppers were 99 cents at Burger King after my hockey game. And he'd do it in front of a date. I know for a fact he did it in front of Jody way back in the day when we were playing hockey and she was dating one of my best friends. And that's the stuff that's just hilarious when you think about how designated the men are. But my fondest memories are doing man stuff. And I think I would love to call this show like, Woodsman, man stuff, land life, whatever. And because I think it's more about men doing men, act like men, preach it to Ben, saying you're not alone. If you can talk about Thanksgiving right now, what would you say is your goal at 46? I'm 46. So if you are, your birthday's the end of the year.
That's right.
So you're not there yet. So if you're 45, and you're telling a bunch of men listening right now that are just wore out by deer, they either shot the biggest buck of their life or they're still dreaming about shooting the biggest buck of their life. And I'm going to tell them how to get that done and don't give up hope. But if you were to tell some 45-year-old guys like us, some 20-year-old guys, if we were back in the day, our dads were still alive, how to get through Thanksgiving, how to love on your moms. Right now, we are both in full effect taking care of 2 women that absolutely mean everything to us, our mothers. Both in positions of retirement, health declining, and we're trying to be men that are vulnerable enough to just be still and love them and not regret the time we won't have with them. Like, we're smart enough to know that we're going to regret that time we don't spend. And so you are a good son. You come home and you take care of your mom. And so, like, what do we tell our younger selves, men listening right now?
I think that this coincides with both men and women, with your mom or your dad. If I could go back to my 20-year-old self, I would ask my parents, ask my dad. Let's just talk about him specifically since he's gone. I would ask my dad to spend some time or carve out some time to write down some of his childhood memories, write down some of his experiences in his life, and just ask him.
Just talk about them? Like for what
Write
reason?
them down.
What reason for writing them down?
I think
because I think we're going to differ on this, but I'm okay with this. Go for it.
I think that that's one thing that I personally regret about my father is that I never got to really know him.
Okay, there it is. You want to know him. And your way to know him would be to write these things out and then talk about these things as him being younger. So that's why I was asking is like, my wife really likes to remember and reminisce and live in the past, where that's not always healthy.
Yeah, that's not good.
And so that's why when you were asking that, I was like, okay, well, I wonder why he's asking. Where's he going with this? And so yours is to get to know him.
Like I want to know like what his feelings were when he saw my mom at that high school dance and asked her to dance. Yeah. Like I want to know what that feeling, what was going on?
Was he an awkward little dude, or was he Jimmy Cook with the little crooked smile?
You know, because my parents met before before he went to the war, and then he came back, and then he married my mom and had my sister first, and then me. So it's stuff like that. I don't necessarily need to hear about the bad stuff, from his upbringing. But
no, you're desiring the real stuff.
And I the reason why I touch on that is because my mom told me recently that his father, my grandfather, would come down to from the bar, come home at 3:00 in the morning and sit them boys around the kitchen table and berate them. And I never heard that story. I had never heard that story.
And so you heard that from your mother?
From my mother.
And she was telling you
what my father
Jimmy gave him.
Yeah. Yes. And I thought that was alarming. That's an interesting piece of information.
No. And so I'm with you on that, because the minute you start putting pieces together of who they were, you can, are you guys listening to this? We're about ready to tell you the secret to life here about men and abuse and understanding your fathers. And so you can say this, here you go. When I realized that my father didn't understand everything, like we think they're the heroes, we think that they're the everything to us, and that they have it all figured out. They don't. Your dad right now, if you're listening to this and your dad's at home or whatever, and you think your dad has it figured out, he doesn't have it figured out. He's just a little further down the road, and probably his give a dang's broken, and he's just gone through a little more life, and that's what comes. But what you're saying right there, we want to know their vulnerability and their intimacy of how they define stuff, and then we then can correlate that with our little insecurities and understanding. And then you just have this really dad didn't have it figured out either, and he was just trying to protect us. And there was a moment in time when I was probably 38 or 40. Your dad had already passed, yes?
Mm-hmm.
And then my dad was still alive. And there was a moment where everything that I ever did in my life was either to prove a teacher wrong that said I couldn't be nothing, to prove a counselor wrong at Limestone that said I shouldn't be a man, I should just be a nothing, trash man, or I forget what they insulted me and a garbage man. Like they insulted so many people in that conversation. I didn't give up. I went 5 years of high school, which led us to be better friends. And so then, but I remember my father, I felt like he had it all figured out. And then like your dad passed, and then I don't know if there was just a soul searching time in my life, but I realized that my father was as messed up as I was, and that he didn't have it figured out. And I all of a sudden, for the first time in my life, felt sorry for my father on what he went through when he was a boy. And I forgave him instantaneously without ever talking to him, without him acknowledging the abuse or the physical or the verbal abuse or whatever. Like mine was mainly physical. My father was really rough on me.
I did that at the wrong time. I forgave my dad at the wrong time.
Was it after his passing?
It was right before he passed away.
Oh, so when he was in because he was in hospice, right?
No, he died at home.
He just died at home. He was real sick, right? Cancer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you forgave him really late.
Very late.
And you were at home with him. Like you were hanging out there. You were there a lot. And my dad was actually before, because if you guys don't know the story of my father, I found him, or his friends found him. I was trying to get a hold of him. He was laying on the floor for several days, y'all, with a stroked out by himself, cold. And I had to be the one to make the decision to not do anything. The last thing that I saw was me having a conversation with my father, and he didn't know who I was. And when he was laying on that floor, and then they brought him to the hospital, and I met him there. It was the sense of relief that one, somebody had found him, which is his neighbors, his friends, and they rushed him to the hospital. And then I looked at him, and he saw that I was there. He knew that as hard as he was on me for 44 years, that I was there to make a decision that he had to have made. And after I talked to my friend that there was the brain surgeon, brilliant man, he was like, listen, your father's not ever going to be anything more than getting out of this bed, whatever. Like he's pretty far gone. You're gonna have to make a decision. You need to do him a favor. So being able to make that decision, I think Jordan Peterson talks about it, that you should be able to stand at a funeral and be the one not crying, be the one not upset, and just be very still in the fact that you've became the man that your father always wanted you to be, and that you are now generationally the patriarch of the family. And you are to, if you can think on the good times that you had with your father, and the good times and the stuff, not good times. It's not joy. It's not happiness. Now, that's not what we're searching for or saying. I think the men part is, if you feel like you've either had the closure and the forgiveness that you had in his dying moment, dude, you at least had it, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it was years prior that I just went, oh man, he's just like me. But my father pulled me aside at 18 and said, we were sitting on the floor, and he said, he told me that he was divorcing my mom before he told her. And I remember him bawling, and I was young, man. I was young. I was 10, 11, 12 when he told me that. And so my father always confided in me, and maybe that's where my truth comes. Like, I have to tell the truth, and I have to be justice, and I have to have all these things. So when my father, then I had to, I guess, make those decisions. Like, it was all in God's plan for me to make decision to where we didn't do any proactive to keep him alive. It was his time. And that's the hardest decision I'll ever make, I think, hopefully I ever make. And being able to have that moment where I decided that everything that my father went through, I saw him not as my father, but as a little boy. And I saw him as a teenager. I saw him as a young man. And then I saw him making decisions, not always the right one. And the minute that I realized and saw him like that, and figured, even as an old man, he didn't have life figured out, he didn't actually know everything, man, it was so freeing.
Yeah. I want to touch on,
so freeing,
that comment that I made, where I feel like you're a product of your environment, because your father and your mother, but we'll talk about our fathers, they were products of their environment.
Yeah.
So like you said, they don't necessarily have it all figured out to be a dad.
Yeah.
To be
they didn't have a good example, because they had such strict parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think that my dad's had a terrible, strict, very, very tough upbringing, which I've learned after the fact, after his death. Yeah. I've learned a lot of that information. I think I learned more about my dad at the funeral than I ever did about him when he was alive. It was incredible amount of information, and the people that you're able to meet in those times.
I think you seeked him, like you seeked all this understanding for why your dad was crabby and disgruntled and was that guy. Like, he was the character. Literally, dude, if we had a cartoon and we had a disgruntled postal guy, it was your dad.
Yeah, he was a very different person.
But he's not the only one. So, like, that's not an insult. He would actually laugh at me right now.
Yes.
But he's not the only one, especially when you come from a family of postal people. Like there is something. The mail never stops, people. The mail never stops. You're always unloading those trucks.
Yeah, I want to make a comment too about how I am as a person from the way that I was raised, which I was predominantly raised by my mother.
Yep, both of us.
And that is a huge deal because, I didn't have necessarily
We're mama's boys. We
father figure. And then when I was with my dad, it was generally negative for the most part. It was pretty negative in my experience.
Well, yeah, because they were pissed off at their life.
And my dad, had a lot of time in the local pub, and then that's probably why I'm such a good pool player now, because I spent so many years, in the pub. But it goes back to what I was trying to say, is that he's a product of his environment. I'm a product of my environment. And, I don't have children, but I think that if I did have children, I would be very strict.
So you've forgiven him?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what we're saying, y'all. For all you guys, all you dads out there, one, forgive yourselves, because your boys get it, but you need to talk to them and you need to give them intimacy about you, why you are the way you are. And the vulnerability is going to come from your sacrifice to our Lord and Savior, and what the good book says and the gospel says. Hey, we're here. Andy's part of this now. So you guys will reach out and we'll lead you in the right direction. Because man, this holidays are the toughest things that you could ever imagine. One, dealing with loss. Like we don't have our dads to go hang out with. And now we got our moms. So we're pouring into our mothers, and we're both mama boys. And I was a fighter. Andy wasn't so much a fighter. He loves people way more than I love people. And you and your mom have always had a really, really fun relationship.
Yeah.
And even your sister, like we got a whole ball of crazy in both of our families, us involved in the crazy, but very similar. And our moms are the greatest.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely saint.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
For putting up with us. Your mom worked 40 years like mine did, 35 or 40 years or whatever.
Two jobs.
Always busy.
Yeah.
Always busy. Worked till she retired from the bag factory.
Yeah.
Right?
Bemis Bag Company.
Yeah. And then my mom was a school teacher. And so like they both had to put up with this. And so if you had to tell a younger version of yourself, what would you say right now? If you are, one, chasing girls, number two, trying to be and make your mark on this world or whatever, the only thing I think I can plead, and then I'll let Andy go, is I plead with you to just go sit with your mama and watch her make the pies and watch her fuss over the grandkids, or watch her do whatever. Just go stand with her and go be with her. And man, I don't care if you have to have a talk with yourself in the car, go out back and pray about it. But if you just go spend time with your mom, they don't want anything more than that, man.
Yeah.
And that's an old man talking to you guys that are in the final seasons with their parents. Just go be with them. Yeah.
Just yesterday, I spent some time with my mom. We went Thanksgiving food shopping.
Oh yeah.
At Kroger.
Yeah.
And then the at Costco.
Yeah, Costco.
Oh my gosh. My mom absolutely despises going to the shopping.
But I'll bet you she remembers it with you.
Yeah. Yeah. We just hung out and I let her do her thing, and she had her little list, and we went down the list and we forgot a few items, but it's no big deal.
That's our challenge. That's our challenge to you boys and girls out there. Most of the girls are pretty good about spending time with your mom, but we are pleading with you boys out there, because we can't really speak from the girl side. You boys out there, go spend time with your mom.
Yes.
Even go to the store. Even go.
I hate shopping. I cannot stand shopping. My girlfriend, she's like, "Hey, you want to go to the Target with me?"
You're like, "No, I'd rather have you punch me in the face.
No.
Let me know what we're getting."
No, because we're going to spend $483 if I go.
Yeah, right. Because everything sounds good. So that's our stuff. If you're with your dads,
yeah.
You know what? And if you are right now between, should I fly home or drive home? Should I go see them? Answer's yes. But don't put yourself in a position for it to be dangerous. Number one, make sure you're getting sleep. This is from a guy that travels everywhere. Andy travels a lot now, but I used to travel and travel and travel and travel. So if you can make it home and it makes sense, pray about it and go ahead and get home. If you cannot, they make this thing called Zoom and FaceTime now, and just go FaceTime your mom. Tell her to turn the phone around and that you just want to watch her prepare the meal and you just want to be there on the phone with her. Just I bought my mom an iPhone from Brandon just so she could FaceTime. Well, big shout out to Andy for being here. I really thank him for sharing his story about his father and, somebody that has been in my life for the last 40 years. And I just appreciate his friendship. I appreciate him being here. I appreciate his support with the podcast and everything else that we're doing. So now it's really on to the deer portion of the show. We've talked about how you need to do the stuff for your mother and your family and Thanksgiving and all the stuff as you go through deer season. I think the main majority that we're all able to go hunt is because of our support team, our support staff, our mothers, our fathers. And when it comes to the deer, like right now, it is November 21st. And I've watched these bucks today on trail camera really kind of come out of the woodwork after this big front has just passed. All the rain, all the winds that have been sucking into the system's kind of here now. And that means that system is coming out of the west, southwest, west, northwest. And as it gets consistent 5 to 7 miles an hour, a little, wetness in the air, that just lays down for perfect conditions as these bucks are still locking down with these does, but they're really going to just start traveling. You're going to see really big deer that you haven't seen all year show up on camera, but they may only be there once or twice. I've told you before, you need to be the trail camera. You need to be in the woods. This is where you have to find the love for hunting and the love for just sitting and getting in a real consistent basis. If you can go hunt in the morning, this is still a time to hunt in the morning, hunt till 9, 10, 11. If you can't get out till 8:30 in the morning after you take the, kids to school or they've got basketball in the morning, if you can just go sit in the middle of the day, go sit in the middle of the day. As these temperatures get cooler, but these bucks are still trying to find the last couple does, or let's really face it, as the last does are coming into estrus and these bucks are searching for these does, they'll also be trying to smell and see as the, kind of the herd matures and the young does, the fawns are becoming, old enough that they will go into estrus. This is just going to carry over into December and even up till late February in some places where these young fawn does are going to get bred. So you're going to watch. You're really going to just watch deer movement get more consistent because we haven't had it all year. The weather dictates deer movement for me anyways. Weather over everything. The rut's really for rookies. You're getting back into the calculated hunting times. This is for all you boys and girls that have been putting in food plots. This is when your time is going to pay off. The December time of clover is magical. From the week of Thanksgiving to the second week of December, if you have clover, like Clover Rush from White Gold, that's what I use. It's just so hearty and it's really, really palatable for these critters that are just getting off of like a 2 or 3 week fast while they've been, doing deer stuff and not really feeding. As they get on their feet and they start running through the gamut of life and the end of this rut, they're really going to be looking for something to eat, but not too much food, like packing themselves full of acorns or corn or soybeans. So they're just going to look for a little bit of kind of greens to graze on as they search for these does. And the does are strapping on the feed bag. So I think a lot of times you'll see the does kind of herd back up 5, 6, 7 of them at a time. A doe will find her fawns from this year. She'll group back up with them. She'll have her fawns from last year. There'll be a family group. And then what you'll see is these big family groups. And then you'll see just one doe that's trying to get with the group, but she still has has to come into estrus. So you'll get some of these things where the bigger deer or really any of the bucks kind of get confused, and they see the does and they're trying to read them from across the field, or they're trying to read them through the timber. Is that doe's tail flickering, how she's holding her, her body? And a lot of times they can't defer that through the timber. Or if a little buck, she still may smell good and a little buck kind of bumps her along, that may freak this bigger buck out into having to go check this little doe group to see if they've all been bred. They'll know instantly, but that may be enough to bring them out into the food plot, do one little loop around, and then off to the races, going to the next bedding area or the next little feed zone. And so while these things are happening and these bigger deer are just going, think of it like going down, down the road to the bar. They're going from this bar to this bar to this bar, trying to figure out, what's going on and what girls are there that are wanting to get frisky, and they're literally going from bar to bar to bar, just figuring it out. And so this is when you're going to see bucks moving long distances across fields. I don't think we've seen a lot of that already this year. Do not give up on this Thanksgiving week. This weather is going to be right. And listen, one of the biggest cards that I keep in my hat, one of the feathers in my cap, one of the cards that I play is the full moon. And you have a full moon. I'm trying to think. It's like in 6 days, the 27th, the 26th, the 25th. Like I always say that 48 hours before the full moon, because that full moon could be really full at noon or midnight. And so I always just play it safe. And I know that 48 hours, those 2 daylights before that full moon evening. And I think that plays out to around the 25th or 26th, 27th. I'll have to check that out, and I'll do another pod here this week on it. But really, you're going to want to find out those days and take those days off of work, because it's going to be fire, and you're going to have these big deer on their feet. And it might be the most incredible couple days to hunt as this rut winds down, and you're looking for to still capitalize on a giant whitetail. There's a lot of guys out there, man, that are watching Facebook and watching Instagram, and there's so many people that have killed big deer this year. And this happens every year. And then I think they feel like they're left out. Well, I want to commend you at not just shooting some little buck that you're not going to mount. I want to commend you for that. I want to commend you for the purpose that you're out there enjoying nature and being out there and being consistent with it. And I wouldn't give up, because I've shot some really, really big deer late in the season after, let's say, the fair weather hunters have given up. So I can tell you that I have friends right now that I've got into the food plot game and into the land management game that have so much food on their property that they've been waiting for Thanksgiving. They've been waiting for this late November full moon, and they're going to hunt from then all the way through January. And it's just going to be better than, all the early stuff, especially on a year like this year where you've got you've just got kind of a screwy, moon with a really warm fall. Man, I'm telling you, you're going to look, if you don't have a food plot, but if you guys are into food plots, you're going to want to look at your standing beans right now, corn always, your sorghum, your brassica plots, your clover. And if I had to pick one right now, they're either going to be on clover or munching on brassicas when it's kind of a warmer day. And then I think when it gets really cold, if you have a real cold day, they're going to go to those. They're going to go to those bean pods. They're going to go to those soybeans. So that's kind of a way to determine where to hunt on which given evening. And really, I want to tell you again, like, even if you're on public ground, even my Airbnb isn't rented for the next couple weeks, but there's a lot of state ground around that doesn't have food. You're not going to have the pressure because everybody's going to be around the holidays. You could come rent that Airbnb and have like 80 of your buddies stay with you, help cut the cost, and then you can go hunt up in Knox County or Peoria County at the state areas. And what you're going to want to look for then as you get in this little bit of late season is they have some fields around, but you're really going to want to, find where these acorns have hit the side of hills and they're kind of going to run to the bottom. There'll be, they're going to be back hitting acorns again, but they're also going to hit these locust pods. And if you don't know, out in the Midwest, you got these locust trees, and these locust pods, if you can find a hedgerow or something that has locust trees in and around it and has these big male plants with these pods, this is a big food source for whitetails in the winter as we get some of this weather. I think I looked at next Monday. You are going to be looking at some incredibly low numbers in the teens at night, and that's just going to put these deer in overload. And one thing I want to say is that if you get a giant cold front coming, that first day of that cold front, don't be fooled. If I had to pick a day, I would pick the second day after this big cold drop. A lot of people will go hunt this really big cold snap. It'll just snap. And sometimes they'll feed before that, but that's not where I play my card. I play my card on this big cold snap, and then once it evens out, even on day 2 or even day 3, you'll get sometimes a warm up with a south wind after a couple norths. And I know that's a jury thing or whatever, but it seems to be really true. And so I don't like the original cold drop. I like once it gets cold and then levels out day 2 or day 3. It seems like those deer conserve their energy and they just lay there for 2 days. And then once they kind of get their wits about them, they get through the original cold snap. They go, okay, now I need to eat. And that's when you'll see this big movement. And as this real cold weather gets here in December, that's when you're going to watch me really advise and start hunting evenings, and evenings only. But I'm talking about like 1 in the afternoon, 2 in the afternoon, get there early. These deer will be on their feet, moving to where they're going to eat and hanging out a lot more than normal. So I think we'll go over that in the next pod. I really appreciate you guys. Again, I'm a land, just a land lover, man. Land life, it is my life. This is Chris Brackett's Land Life podcast. But the whole premise of this was to talk to you about men and talk to you about life and talk to you about, goals and whitetails and just about really anything chasing critters. And I just want to thank Herman Brothers Realty, where I work. I'm a broker. I also do consults where I go to people's properties all over the country and we make plans for them. We go over everything, their goals, big deer, little deer, more deer. It doesn't really matter to me. You don't have to chase a 200 incher. I'm there to help you. I'm there to help you make your property better, the juice worth the squeeze, what you're putting into it, gaining equity, finding out how to just love the land more. I also have online consults, which is whitetaillandlife.com. We can do an online consult where I help you make moves on your property, make plans for your property. It's a great way for people to do, like right now, they need to make a move on an animal or get kind of an idea for what a consult would look like. And then I take that off the price of the boots on the ground consult where I come to your farm. Man, I just really appreciate Andy for being here, and then you guys just for making this such a success. Have a great Thanksgiving, and I'll probably do another one before Thanksgiving. But if I don't talk to you, give us a follow on Facebook, give us a like, Instagram, Chris Brackett Land Life, Chris Brackett's Land Life, Instagram, Facebook, and I just thank you very much. Appreciate you.